Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 8 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. We're really excited to break down the Chicago Bears today. I'm Brady.
Bears.
Have my co-host Mitch here. Have also a new guest on the show, Skylar.
What's up?
Sky
Hey,
Guy.
guys.
Me and Sky Guy are cousins. We've known each other literally since birth.
Yeah.
And as we broke down, Mitch and I have known each other for about 10 years. So these guys are just kind of like Skylar's just like us, you know. He's just a fourth string quarterback, the same way that we are, you know, couch quarterback.
Yeah.
We in the last episode that we appreciate everybody listening to, we broke down the Carolina Panthers. We also talked about the kind of different ways that the NBA season may come back. As we stated, we do kind of plan on breaking down some various sports and how they might come back. With baseball, we should have already been 40 games into the season, you know. With college football, this is really crucial with recruits not being able to meet up at their schools and stuff. So we're going to talk about how that might come back in the next couple episodes. And the NFL, we may not talk about at all with how they might come back because the NFL is planned in like full ship ahead, no real issues. So who knows how it's going to work out. But before we break down the Bears, there was a little bit of an update with the NBA, and it's that Adam Silver informed the league, I think they're called like the league governors is like their technical term.
Board of Governors.
There you go, the Board of Governors, that the return date is supposed to be July 31st for the NBA. Now, the NBA has been on hiatus since, I believe, mid-March, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds about
March 11th.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so we're talking about, I mean, we're getting to nearly 3 months. We should be either heading into the conference finals or just getting out of the semifinals right now. Like, we're way behind schedule. And so the NBA finished with about 20 games left in the season, depending on what team you were. So there was definitely still playoff seeding that could be figured out. And it was interesting. But we broke that down in the last episode. Go back, listen to that. As we get more news, we'll break it down in the next couple of episodes. But I guess the question, you guys, is just, does July 31st seem like a reasonable date for the NBA to return?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like we've just talked about, since March 11th, the NBA has been on hiatus. So I think there's been enough time for the NBA as a league office to kind of figure out what's going on. I mean, I know that Adam Silver did say that this coming Thursday they're going to announce how the playoffs are going to work. So it seems like they have a structure in place, and I feel like it gives the players enough time to, keep getting in shape so the play in quality doesn't fall off once we see them. I think that they're not going to go straight into the playoffs. I know they want at least a couple games, just for the players to, knock off the rust and for financial reasons. So I definitely think that July 31st is viable for the NBA.
Yeah, I think that, from the NBA has been one of the leagues that we've been hearing more about what their plans have been for like restarting. At least they've been more open about it. And Adam Silver seems to be taking this like very seriously. And Mark Cuban, even when it started, he wanted the season to come back, but he even said like July. So I think that they are taking it very seriously to do this safely. And they're thinking about things that I never even thought of about doing. And they seem to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do it. As we get closer, it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do, though.
Yeah, and, basketball is definitely a little bit more of a sport built for it. Like, if you were to break down just roster and coaches and just have those guys there, like, not including any trainers or anything like that, you're talking about at most 20 people per team, you know? So it's not a ton of people.
I think they're limiting to, like, 35 people.
And that sounds about right. Trainers and other coaches and stuff like that. And, like, that makes sense. But, like, I love the NBA talking about figuring out plans for the players' families to come down.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge issue in baseball right now with their return. They definitely picked a state, Florida, that has, you could argue, taken this the least seriously of most states. Basketball is a sport a little bit different than football in that the court itself doesn't really get ruined by players playing on it that much,
Yeah.
Like, we talk all the time. I mean, we're going to talk about the Bears today. Soldier Field is historic for being one of the worst fields to play on.
Yeah.
And you don't really get that with basketball courts, My issue with it is how they're going to come back, and not in the sense of are they going to go right into the playoffs or not. My issue is like, if we want the best basketball we're going to see, some of these games shouldn't count against these teams. Like, we're immediately talking about playoff seeding. There should be probably 4 like preseason games that these people get to play before we really have to worry about what playoff spot the Trailblazers are going to get or what playoff spot the Nets could get, because like that can hurt them so badly heading into this.
And that seems to be the thing that's like holding up this the most, is them trying to figure out how they're going into the playoffs, because they've all kind of decided that they're not going to finish the rest of the season. They're not going to do the last 20 games. It's deciding what they're going to do. They floated around the idea of the play-in for the playoffs, so having like the 8 or 9 teams compete for those like last 2 spots. They've done the 1 through 16 seeding, the World Cup style like group stage thing that they were thinking about too. And that seems to be the thing that the NBA as a whole and the Board of Governors can't agree on, is how they're going that transition period from coming back and then going into playoffs. They can't seem to agree on that part yet. And that is going to be the most interesting thing to see between now and the 31st when this gets back.
Yeah, to talk about your point, Brady, I think if they do play some games, like regular season games, I don't think it's going to count towards their record. I think it's going to be more like what you said, like preseason kind of like games, just to like get them back into shape. And it's nothing like winning, losing doesn't matter. It's all about getting the players ready. And then they're going to have the playoff tournament, like they said multiple times, because I know me and you talked about it before the episode a couple of days ago that it's been leaked out that the NBA wants like Zion Williamson and the Pelicans in the playoffs, and they're trying to get like 20 to 22 teams in. So I think you're going to be a couple regular season games that don't matter just to get them in shape. Then we're going to have a play-in tournament to decide the seeding, and then we'll go into the playoffs. I think that's what the NBA wants to do.
Yeah, and I find that so stupid, frankly. Because if it's that the NBA is going to try to force one team in, hey, who would you rather see in the playoffs? The Pelicans or the Warriors, right? Right now, neither of them would get in. But if we're talking about a fully healthy Warriors team, a team that could beat the Rockets, a team that could beat the Trailblazers or the Nuggets, even without KD there, like, because they did it last season. Like, KD was hurt the majority of the playoffs, Like, why I would rather see them in the playoffs than the Pelicans. So if we're just going to force teams in, then, screw it. Let's do a 1 through 30 tournament where the Bucks take on whoever the worst team in the NBA. I actually think the worst team in the NBA is the Warriors. Actually, so I don't know if we want to play them. But you know what I mean, where we're going to do a 1 through 30 and then just go from there. Like if we're gonna try to force teams in, let's just force all the teams in and call it the way it is. It is interesting that like this has obviously been a very fluid situation. Like the way that it's changed has been just super fluid, super interesting. Like Mitch said, we're hoping to hear a decision by Thursday. So on the next episode we drop, there probably won't be any updates. But on the Cleveland episode we get to, there'll most definitely be updates. We may drop a special episode, or we may focus the first half of that Cleveland episode onto the NBA returning. So it's definitely going to be interesting. But let's move on to the Chicago Bears. Now, we've made it very vocal on this podcast that both Mitch and I are Packer fans. Skylar is a Patriot fan, but his dad is a Bears fan.
Yeah, it's a weird situation to grow up in, having a lot of family from Wisconsin being Packer fans, dad being a Bear fan, and then just me out of nowhere deciding to be a Patriot fan. It's a fun family dynamic.
Yeah, it definitely is. It makes for some interesting trash talk.
At least you picked a good team.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
Everybody got traded to Tampa.
Well, you still got Belichick, so.
Yeah, it's time to decide who made that the dynasty. Was it Brady or was it Belichick? In my opinion, it was both of them. We'll just see what happens. So
yeah, and I mean we'll get to New England. They're a little bit down the list here, but when we get to them, it's definitely going to be interesting because, just speaking on the Patriots a little bit, like you could look at one NFL expert and they're like the Patriots are going to go 10-6 and make the playoffs, and the other one's like the Patriots are going to go 1-15. And it's almost like there's no in between,
See, I trust what I hear coming out of the Patriot camp. Like I trust what I hear from them because I know from the culture that's around them is that it's a no nonsense culture. Like they aren't about like hyping things up to hype things up. I think that when they say Jarrett Stidham's going to be their quarterback for the future right now, I believe when they say that. Having Stephon Gilmore, like former defensive player of the year, or I mean technically current defensive player of the year, like Rex Burkhead, and some of the wide receivers and offensive linemen saying that Jarrett Stidham is leading the team right now, through all of this. Like, I believe them when they're telling that, because if they didn't have anything to say about him, they just wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You know, Stidham was good at Baylor. He was good at Auburn. I don't think he ever lived up to the hype. But obviously, like we said, we're going to get to the Patriots here. Speaking of teams that are full of nonsense and have not been run very well, moving on to the Chicago Bears. Now, we're going to be, at least I am going to try to be as impartial as I can. I've spent a lot of the last couple of days, you know, at my free time, watching and like breaking down a lot of the Bears games this last season. And I came to the conclusion that I have no idea how to rate the Bears. That they suck, yeah. That I have no idea how to rate them, because it's they would play some games where they would do everything right and then still seem to lose. And they would play one or two games where it seemed like they did everything wrong and they would win. And those, I mean, primarily those were against Detroit. But it seems like this is once again a Bears organization that doesn't really have a direction and doesn't really know, you know, frankly, it's asshole from its face. Like they don't seem to know or understand. They don't know where they are at, you know? And what is interesting to me is that, like, when Matt Nagy took over, this was a 4-12 Chicago team.
Yeah.
If you would have told me 2 seasons after they'd be 8-8, I'd have told you what an improvement. But the issue was they had a 12-4 season in between.
And I think the problem with it is that it's the unreliability at the quarterback position. Like, we kind of keep forgetting that Mitchell Trubisky only played one season at quarterback at UNC. Because Chicago traded up to pick him, he has this pressure under him. If they had just waited at their position that they were at and just drafted him there, because I believe he still would have been available there.
At 3,
then it would have been fine. It would have been fine. There wouldn't be nearly as much pressure. I don't know. Adding Nick Foles to the situation, I don't know what to make of it. I think that they need stability in Chicago. And sadly, they're going into this next season with a lot of things up in the air.
Yeah, and it's kind of so funny that, you know, after last season, Chicago was like, we're a kicker away from winning the Super Bowl. So they spent the entire offseason just focusing on kickers. And, like, it was talked about everywhere. It was like the coaches only talked about kickers. They brought in, like, kicking specialists who rated the kickers on a practice-by-practice basis, like who was at the top, who was at the bottom, who was in the middle. And they ended up with a kicker who still lost them games. You know,
didn't they win Denver off a walk-off kickoff?
They did, and then
they had
lost.
One good kick.
They lost to the Chargers like 3 weeks later.
Yeah,
on a bad kick. You know, so it's like there was nothing, and I think they were just so focused on. I think they fooled themselves into thinking they had built a 12-4 team, and so in this last offseason, they didn't put themselves in the position to improve on that 12-4 team. You know. And that's why they ended 8-8 in 2019. And it was a disappointment. Like, working with as many Bears fans as I do, they walked into the season like they already had their Super Bowl parade route figured out. They were like, I'm going to stand here. It's going to be bigger than when the Cubs won the Super Bowl or won the World Series. Jesus Christ. And this is just, it's going to, you know, we're going to party like it's 1985. And then the whole season turned to shit. And I say it with a smile on my face because I'm a Packer fan, but it is sad to watch. Mitch, what are your kind of thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, the whole, like, fooling themselves into thinking that they're a kicker away kind of reminds me of what's happening at Michigan right now with Jim Harbaugh saying that they're, like, one step away from winning a national championship, even though they get their ass kicked every year by Ohio State, and somehow they think they can make the playoffs. So I kind of alluded to that, but yeah, I totally agree. I think it kind of stems from, like, Ryan Pace as a GM. He's made a lot of moves that have hurt the team. I mean, even their best move of signing Khalil Mack, they still had to give out a boatload of picks and taking on that big contract that's like hamstringed them. So
yeah,
you
they gave
gotta,
up multiple first-round picks, multiple third-round picks, and then the other big thing is like you lose compensatory picks when you make a signing that big. And
yeah,
you saw like New England this season, talking about the Patriots, had so many compensatory picks for how
Yeah.
many guys they lost that you
Well, it's
can
'cause they cleared
rebuild a
cap
team
space.
just based off that. And Chicago
Yeah.
doesn't have that opportunity.
yeah, exactly. And then the whole like drafting Mitch Trubisky, you're taking a guy who had 12 or 13 starts over, Deshaun Watson, who, won Clemson a national championship and has been a proven winner. And he was a great underrated player for some reason. And then, Patrick Mahomes is a guy who, there was a lot of hype around him, who had the talent. And obviously we saw what he's become in the Kansas City, and, the Bears kind of goofed on that, then it's hurt them. And now they have to sign a guy like Nick Foles, who's only ever been good in Philadelphia. So I'm interested to see what Foles can do outside of Philadelphia, even though the two teams he's played for was a Jeff Fisher team and he got injured with Jacksonville. So
Yeah, I mean, there is familiarity with Nick Foles and Matt Nagy. He was in Kansas City when Matt Nagy was, I think, the quarterback coach there. He did play some games, so I think he has an understanding as to the offense that Matt Nagy wants to run. The issue that kind of I think they end up getting ran into is that in Kansas City, they weren't running Matt Nagy's offense. They were running Andy Reid's offense, and how is Nick Foles going to now adjust to what Matt Nagy wants to do? And the Bears offense was super interesting last year because I couldn't figure out if it was too complex for Mitch Trubisky to handle or if they simplified the playbook so much because they didn't think he could handle it. Does that make sense? Like was it so complex that some of the dumb plays he made were because he just didn't know what was going on? Or was it so simple because they didn't think that if they expanded the offense, he could handle it? And I think they ran into a lot of issues there.
I think either way, he was just in his head too much.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
You could see it when he would just step back to throw, like even a simple screen pass, like he couldn't do anything. My dad being a Bears fan, I watched a lot of Bears games this last season, for good or it's okay. But you could just tell that the reason he had such a good season in 2018 is because you could tell he was just doing what came natural to him. He was just working. He was trusting his instincts, going with what the first thing he saw, the first thing that made sense to him. This last season, whether it was simple or complicated, he was in his head too much, and I think that's what ultimately killed him. He was just in his head too much. That and the injuries he had throughout the season.
Do you think it was the pressure from having such a great season with Matt Nagy when Matt Nagy first came? Having being 12-4, winning the North and getting into the playoffs, and then ultimately losing the double doink. And he's got to think, okay, I got to play better so we can win some playoff games and hopefully win a Super Bowl. And so he gets in his head, and then everything kind of falls apart.
I think that even in 2018, he didn't play exceptional. He threw 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Now, in 2019, he threw 7 less touchdowns. He only threw 17, but he threw 2 fewer interceptions. So there was a definite change in decision-making there. Now, granted, he missed some games, but he missed some games in 2018 too.
He was more dynamic in 2018.
I agree.
He could go out. I equate it to what happened to Adrian Martinez for Nebraska this last year, where it was the pressure, whatever it was, it could be whether it was the offensive line not communicating as well, your skills players not living up to their hype, like David Montgomery. He still ran for almost 900 yards, but he wasn't near. There were people that were picking him to be offensive rookie of the year, which I didn't understand really coming from Iowa State. I didn't think that that's what he could do in his first year, but I think he put a lot, like Mitch was saying, he put a lot of the pressure on himself to elevate them past, to make them worthy of that 12-4 season, when really wasn't Mitchell Trubisky that made them 12-4. It was their defense creating turnovers and scoring off those turnovers.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. It almost felt like in 2018, it felt like the offense could do whatever they want because they knew the defense could get a stop, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like the offense could get super tricky. And, like, I would listen, because going into work, I would listen to ESPN 1000, which is the Chicago station. So I'd listen to all these guys, and they're talking about, where are the trick plays? Like, where are all these cool, fancy plays we saw in 2018? And the thing is like when you're losing as consistently as the Bears were, you can't afford to throw out trick plays because so many of those are either the greatest play you're going to ever see or they're going to be a pick six, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't think the Bears defense took a step back in 2019. That's the thing a lot of people say. I don't think it took a step back. It just didn't force as many turnovers. And when your offense is so reliant on your defense being that good, you don't grow as an offense. And that's the issue that the Bears really ran into, was that their offense was so simple that it hurt. Like, it hurt to watch at times. And the play I go back to is that third down play against the Rams, where it is third and short. They are on they're on the left hash, and they run a speed option to the weak side of the field. And Trubisky takes 2 steps and then pitches it. And Nagy said, well, he did that because his hip was hurt. If his hip is hurt, you don't call that play. If the point of the play is the mobility of the quarterback, you don't call it. So to say, well, he did it that way because he was hurt was an absolute – it was a full fucking lie is what it was. And
as much as like Mitchell Trubisky blames himself for some of this, because I know he does. Like you can tell just him walking off the field. Like – again, his skilled players were so inconsistent. Taylor Gabriel had a 3-touchdown game. Was it the Redskins that he had a 3-touchdown game against? He only had 1 other touchdown the rest of the season. Like that's inexcusable. As a quarterback, you need your skill position. And I mean, besides David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen, I mean, Allen Robinson's a pretty good threat, but nobody was consistently good at the skill positions for the Bears last year.
I mean, no tight end. Cohen didn't play as much as he did. You know, I mean, they were picking tight ends off the middle of the street and telling them to go play. And that's why they have like 12 on their roster right now. So, I mean, it is interesting. But let's kind of break down their 2019 season, you know, in a little bit in depth here. So in 2019, the Bears went 8-8. Obviously, they went 12-4 the year before. They finished third in the NFC North, which was not good for the playoffs, and they finished 4-2 in division. The one thing I will give Matt Nagy a lot of credit for is that he's only lost 3 division games as a head coach. You know, he's gone 9-3 in division. All 3 of his losses coming to the Packers, but he's found ways to beat the NFC North consistently. And that's really, when you're trying to build a team, that's a great first step. You have to win in division. But they started 0-1 with that absolutely terrible showing on Thursday Night Football against Green Bay. And that was a bad game to watch. Following up the terrible Super Bowl we had, to have that game be the one that started the season off was really upsetting.
Terrible Super Bowl. We still got a 6th ring. That's all I have to say.
Well, yeah, but, you know, suck a dick. So they then rattle off 3 straight wins. They beat Denver. They crushed the Redskins. They beat the Vikings. That game against Minnesota, Trubisky gets hurt really early. So Chase Daniels come in. They then go to London to play the Raiders and blow like a 24-7 lead.
Yeah.
Against the Raiders, or blow a 21-7 lead against the Raiders. And that was the game where Akeem Hicks ended up getting hurt, which I think was crucial for the rest of the Bears season. But that was really the game where people went, oh, maybe the Chicago defense isn't as good as we thought it was. Like, they can be ran against. Like, Josh Jacobs had a really good game against them. Like, their pass rush was non-existent against the Raiders. The Raiders don't even have that good of an offensive line. And the Bears didn't do anything. So then they go to the bye week, and then they rattle off 3 straight losses. They get creamed by the Saints. They lose a heartbreaker to the Chargers. And then they start to come back against the Eagles, but completely fall apart. They come around, beat the Lions. What else is new? They then lose to the Rams, which pretty much eliminated them from playoff contention. After that loss to the Rams, they rattle off 3 straight wins. They beat the Giants. They beat the Lions again. They end up beating the Cowboys, which was a really interesting game. They crushed the Cowboys. The score was 31-24, but it was not that close in reality. but then they follow it up with a tough loss to Green Bay, get crushed by the Chiefs, and then in Week 17 they beat the Vikings after the Vikings have rested all their starters. So we kind of posed this question on the last couple episodes. We're probably going to pose it for each one that goes through. Before we break down their offseason, right now after the 2019 season, where do you put the Bears? In a rebuild, in need of a reload, a playoff contender, a Super Bowl contender, or, any other combination of those?
I would probably say they're in a reload. I'm definitely curious to see what happens if they choose to go with Nick Foles and how different the offense can be. Because I think if they get a solid quarterback, even like an Alex Smith type, I think they could definitely put this team into playoff contention. But I think it's going to come down to, the quarterback play and Skylar was talking about, the consistency from the wide receivers and tight ends outside the running backs. I think it all comes down to that to push them into being that playoff contender. But right now, I think they do need a reload on offense.
I think that it's up. They need to be more dynamic on offense, like what Mitch was saying. Whether that's Nick Foles or it's Mitchell Trubisky, whoever's at quarterback position that gives them some unpredictability, some way to be able to push it forward. If they have that, they're a playoff contender, without a doubt, with the defense they have. But if not, then they need to rebuild their offense. Then if they can't figure that out, then their offense needs to be rebuilt. It's that's just where it's at.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're at this really crucial teetering point where this team could easily make the playoffs, especially now that it's expanded and we're going to 7 teams. This team could easily make the playoffs. But because of that 12-4 season, if the Bears don't make the playoffs, and I'll even say if the Bears don't win a playoff game, Matt Nagy and Mitchell Trubisky could both be gone, as well as Ryan Pace after this season. I know it's a bold prediction, but the Bears really have to do something incredible. And it's really a shame because I think Matt Nagy is actually a pretty decent coach. His issue was he was too successful too quickly,
Yep.
And that 12-4 season made such a high expectation that it's almost impossible. I think it'd be the same situation if the Cardinals last season went 12-4 or anything like that. I think the Niners are going to run into the same expectation this season. They were so dominant last year that if that dominance isn't there, massive question marks are going to start to pop up.
Do you think that'll happen with the Packers? Because Matt LaFleur was a first-year coach, did really well.
Yeah.
And then if they take a step back at all, even don't get if they get a 3 or 4 seed, do you think Packer fans are going to start questioning them?
I don't know I think outside people will start to question them. I don't think Packer fans will.
Okay.
Packer fans may be well, this is what happens when you don't draft a wide receiver. I think that's the biggest, thing you're going to hear from them. And I'm sure Mitch will agree with me on that. But I think everybody else outside of it will. If the Packers win the division, the Packers are happy. It means we get a home playoff game,
Yeah.
And with a home playoff game, hey, we do pretty well at home in the playoffs. So as long as we get that, I think we're happy. With the Bears, it's they just want to get in the playoffs so desperately, so bad. They don't really care what happens, unless Cody Parkey is kicking, but they want to get in the playoffs so bad that it hurts. You almost want to see them in the playoffs just so that Bears fans have something to smile about. But at the same time, they're the Bears, so fuck them. But it is what it is. Mitch, you had them in a reload, right, or in need of a reload?
Yeah, I think they need to reload on the offense.
Yeah, I agree.
And then to point out what your prediction was about Trubisky, Nagy, and Pace being gone, I agree with you. Trubisky's in his last year of his contract, and he doesn't show improvement, he has to go because he's not the franchise quarterback. Ryan Pace has to go because I think he's kind of been a bit of a disaster. But I think you should keep Matt Nagy because I do think he's a good coach. I don't think he's been the biggest problem. I think if you give Matt Nagy a better GM and, a decent quarterback, I think he could give you what you saw in in his first year as a head coach.
Yeah, I definitely think you can too. Sky Guy, you got something to say?
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem with a lot of NFL teams is that they take GMs like Ryan Pace away from teams that are successful. But since Ryan Pace has been at the Bears, he was at the Chiefs, right, before he came to the Bears?
I think he was at the Saints.
The Saints.
With this,
Nagy was with the Chiefs.
Okay, yeah. Well, you take them away from a team that's like been successful for a long time, like the Saints. They don't know how to build a successful team. So you would need somebody from like that's been a part of like the Baltimore organization. You need somebody from that like had to rebuild a team, or like part of the Niners organization. Somebody that knows how to rebuild a team in order to get that. Because any GM that's had to rebuild a team would know that Matt Nagy is a good coach. I agree with both of you. If the Bears don't make the playoffs this year, both Trubisky and Ryan Pace are gone. Like, without a question.
You know, I do agree. I think I agree with my own point, shocker, that, you know, at least Trubisky and Pace will be gone if the season isn't good. I still think one of the three is going to be gone no matter what. I really do. I think that unless the Bears win the Super Bowl, there's no way all three of them stay. I think they've pretty much been fed up with Trubisky. Nagy seems to be, I love Matt Nagy. I love some of the calls that he makes. Like, some of his playbook is so interesting. But Matt Nagy doesn't ever seem to take any actual responsibility. Like, if you listen to his press conferences, it seems like he does, but he never really seems to take any real responsibility for his team. Like, he almost seems to talk about how, well, as a team, we need to do better at preparing. As a team, we need to do better at executing. That's stuff that the coach has to do. If the coach recognizes that problem, he has to instill in the players how to prepare better, how to execute better. And that's where, you know, when you're coming from an Andy Reid system where everything has to be on point to be successful, and then you put it in a team like Chicago who has not been successful, it can be really difficult. One of the most interesting things to me that came out this last season was the current GM of the Indianapolis Colts. What's his name? Ballard, I think.
Yeah, Chris Ballard.
Was about to take the Chicago GM job from Ryan Pace a couple years ago. And he walked in and he said, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of Jay Cutler. And the Bears said, no, you can't do that. Everybody agrees Jay Cutler was terrible.
Yeah, not the Packers.
Yeah, right?
We love him.
Yeah, we love him, right? Wore all the shirts when HaHa Clinton Dix got drafted. It was like HaHa is Jay Cutler's new favorite receiver.
Yeah.
Love that stuff. But the fact that the Bears were so stubborn then has really created the issue that they found now 5 years later. And you've seen Indianapolis has built a successful system. Yep. And the fact that the Colts may make the playoffs again a year after losing their franchise quarterback is a really interesting thing. But to break down some of their free agents here, obviously Nick Foles was the really big one. He wins a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. He then signs with the Jaguars, gets hurt in the first game. A little old guy named Gardner Minshew comes in, actually plays pretty decent. Yep. But when Foles comes back, the Jaguars kind of fall apart completely. He finished 2019 with 736 yards in 4 games. He had 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. As a quarterback, he had that one really good season, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in Philadelphia. Since then, he's thrown 38 touchdowns, 28 interceptions. So not really the ratio you want to see, not a successful quarterback. Other big pickups were Jimmy Graham from Green Bay, 38 catches, 447 yards, 3 touchdowns in 2019. And Robert Quinn from Dallas. I love the Robert Quinn pickup. It's not who they needed. They needed a lot of other things. But Robert Quinn had 42 tackles, 11 and a half sacks. They did add some offensive line help, getting Jermaine Ifedi from right tackle from, I think, Seattle. Is that a successful offseason to you guys for the Bears, just looking at their free agent pickups before we kind of get into their draft?
I think one you forgot was Ted Ginn Jr. They also picked him up from the Saints.
But I
mean, he's old. Like he's getting older. He's not as dynamic. I think if they got him 5 years ago, that would have been awesome. But they didn't. They got old Ted Ginn. I've never really liked Nick Foles. Like, I'll say it I didn't like him even before he beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. God, what a fucking Super Bowl. Might have to bleep me out for that one. But fun fact, Nick Foles has not played more than 13 games in a season. Yeah. The most games he's ever started was 10 games in a season. And that was the year he went 27 into touchdown interception ratio. Love that dog. like I've never understood the hype around him. I get like the improbable run he did in the playoffs. You can't match it. He deserves a statue outside of Philadelphia. I get it. But I never really liked him. I didn't think he ever lived up to the hype. He's really good under pressure, but when you take that pressure and you expand it over 16 games in a season, soon to be 17 games, I don't know. He's definitely more intelligent and more dynamic than Trubisky, having played as a quarterback much longer. I don't know. I do agree the Robert Quinn pickup was great. 11.5 sacks last year. If he stays healthy, he's had a problem with some injuries in his career. I think he adds something. He adds another threat besides Khalil Mack. And Jimmy Graham hasn't had a good season since 2016. So, yeah.
I wouldn't call this free agent class successful. I think it's solid, though. Nick Foles is a slight upgrade over Trubisky, so I definitely think he can win them more games with him at the helm. Robert Quinn, I think, will be the pass rushing partner to Khalil Mack that Leonard Floyd was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you get the improvement there. And then, another pickup that they did for pass rush is Barkevious Mingo. A solid pass rusher, just to add depth, and I think he can, help this team out. And then another big observation from looking at this class is, it's just another NFC North team who likes to pillage Packers castoffs because they signed Jimmy Graham, they signed Trevor Davis, they signed Jason Spriggs.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that they're going to take, our bad players and think that, oh, we're going to steal them and, they're going to become Pro Bowlers and it's just going to blow up in their face.
It's the same with Belichick disciples and New England players. Like
Yeah,
Detroit and Miami, how many have they stolen over the last 3 years?
Exactly.
It is in going through everything, and even when we go through their draft, there's a really outlined thing that the Bears didn't address. And that's they got really no offensive line help. None. I mean, Jermaine Ifedi has never lived up to his expectations. Jason Spriggs was a mid-round pick from Indiana who I really liked when he came out and Green Bay picked him up, but he was never able to produce. An absolute bust. I get it. You maybe got a better quarterback, but that doesn't matter because your offensive line is so bad it hurts.
Yeah, and they lost Kyle Long, your best offensive lineman.
Yeah, you lost Kyle Long. Cody Whitehair did not play as well as they expected him. James Daniel did not play as well as they expected him. And it physically hurts to see a team that so desperately needs offensive line help with how deep this draft class was with offensive linemen to really not go and get any until the 7th round of the draft is ridiculous. The fact that the Bears thought that it was more important to draft 2 cornerbacks as opposed to early offensive linemen, it makes me question what this season is going to be. And
they're not the only team. I mean, look at what the Rams did. The Rams took the same approach.
Well, I also think that they did. They lost players. They lost Prince Amukamara, who, even though he's not the flashiest quarterback, was still a good defensive back.
He played 83% of their snaps.
Yeah, he was one of their – the Bears lost 3 of their top 7 tacklers this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie Jackson has had injury problems, so he's not as reliable. So I understand why they filled some of the – why they drafted some more defensive back help. But I agree, getting Cole – don't get me started on Cole Kmet.
Well, we're about to break it down. Okay. But they replaced a lot of production. I'll give them that. Robert Quinn was, 11.5 sacks. If he can get to that number, that's good. If you think about a tough defensive line, we're going to put Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn on either side and stick Hakeem Hicks in the middle. That is daunting to go up against. I don't care how good your offensive line is. That is terrifying to think about. If he can stay healthy, that's a really important thing. But then it's your defense is going to give up points no matter what. But with the offense they have right now, I don't know if their offense can score any. There's no weapons, pretty much. The quarterback position is such a question mark. Which Nick Foles are we going to get? Are we going to get Big Dick Nick from the playoffs? Or are we going to get, Tiny Balls Nick with Jacksonville? Which Nick are we going to get? Yeah.
Little flick Nick.
Yeah, like exactly. Like, which one are we going to get? Are we going to get the guy who won a Super Bowl? Are we going to get the guy who was replaced by the Washington State quarterback, the 5th-round pick? Like, which one are we going to get? And either way, it's so confusing. It's so difficult to rate this Bears team.
Well, and I think another mistake that they made was, like, as much as I like Jonathan Trevathan, like Trevathan, as much as I do like
Danny
think he's
Trevathan.
James
Yeah.
Trevathan.
yeah, as much as I appreciate him as a linebacker, he's only had like 2 really healthy seasons.
I'd
and they
rather
spent-
them keep Kwiatkowski.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They
that was a
spent
baffling
too much
move.
They spent too much money on Trevathan, who is up in age. He's not healthy, like hasn't been very healthy, and let a young, pretty good linebacker at the same position walk.
Yeah. And that's frustrating because, like, in order to be a successful team, you need your late round picks to do really well and to produce. And Kwiatkowski did that. And then at the first opportunity he got to walk, he even talked about it. He was very public about giving the Bears a discount to stay. But the Bears, the money that they wanted him was nothing compared to what he was going to get. So he left, and he had a great season. I mean, if you want to watch his best game, watch the Week 15 matchup against Green Bay, honestly. And he had Aaron Rodgers dead to rights on an interception that would have probably won the game for Chicago. And unfortunately, he dropped it. But he was in such good position for so long in that game. Like, he really was an anchor on that team. And the fact that the Bears let him walk for Trevathan, I don't know if I agree with.
Trevathan's not going to play the entire season. Like,
I don't know if he's going to play more than 10 games.
He hasn't played. It's realistic. Since 2013, he's had injury after injury. So it's. I mean, honestly, it's just kind of like it's those baffling moves that makes that even if they have a successful season, I think of the three people we said could be gone, Pace is probably the most likely.
Yeah,
because he's the one making those decisions.
Well, I compare it to what happened with Micah Hyde in Green Bay. We preach draft and develop, and Micah Hyde, a late round pick, and he improves each and every year. And then when it comes contract time, we let him just walk out the door, and then he goes to the Buffalo Bills and becomes an all-star. So I think it's definitely a similar situation.
I think this is one we're going to talk about when we break down the Raiders. We're going to say that Kwiatkowski may have been their best free agent pickup.
They also picked up a Mukamara too.
They did. They also picked up a Mukamara and the best quarterback in the NFL, Marcus Mariota. But sorry, I didn't mean that. I meant DeShone Kizer. So let's break down their draft a little bit. The Bears had 7 total picks in the NFL draft. They had 2 second-round picks. They had no first round from the Khalil Mack trade. They also had no third round and no fourth round picks as well. They had 2 seconds, 3 5s, and then 2 7s. So their first overall pick in the second round, pick number 43, they drafted Cole Kmet, tight end from Notre Dame. He had 43 catches, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns. Sky Guy, you seem like you have a strong opinion on Cole Kmet.
Okay, my dad's also a Notre Dame fan, so like Cole Kmet's a good tight end. I agree that he was the best tight end in the class. Like, I honestly agree that he was a solid tight end. But they don't need any more tight ends. Like we're talking about, they needed help on the offensive line. J.K. Dobbins, like I get they had David Montgomery, like they got him, but J.K. Dobbins was still on the board.
Yeah.
And they had a pick 7. They had a pick 7 picks later, where J.K. Dobbins was also still on the board. I understand getting Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson I thought was a good pick. Cole Kmet, they could have gotten just as good of a playmaker, maybe not at the tight end position, but definitely better playmakers at their positions. I get them not having a first or a third hurt them, but I think the center from Temple, was he still available?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, Matt Hennessy was still there.
Yeah, like they could have gotten him. There was a ton of, like you said, this last draft had so much offensive line depth. They could have easily gotten a starter on their offensive line where they got Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is still a good player. I still think that he's talented enough to be a starter with the Bears. Mm-hmm. It's just they needed help elsewhere.
But I think it's pretty obvious what the Bears want to do. Obviously, Nick Foles is going to be the starting quarterback, and then they're just going to run 10 tight end sets. I mean, that's going to be the offense we're going to see. That's their plan.
Foles is going to snap it to himself, and then because the tight ends are going to be spread out, so it's going to be like that play the Colts did against the Patriots, where the punter's underneath and they got the 2 defensive linemen right next to him, and it didn't work out.
I mean, the best punter that's ever played the game.
Yeah. I agree. I really love the Cole Kmet pick. I had him going to the Bears from day one. I thought he was the Bears' big target. The issue that I have is that the Bears need offensive line help. And there was a player named Ezra Cleveland from Boise State who was there unavailable. He eventually ended up going to Minnesota at pick number 58. Ezra Cleveland was at times a first-round pick, like a late first-round pick, very similar to like Zach Bond from Wisconsin. And he kind of fell because there was some other guys who teams thought were a little bit more pro-ready. Had the Bears drafted Ezra Cleveland with either pick number 43 or pick number 50, then all of a sudden this Bears team looks so much more solid to me. But I think Cole Kmet probably could have been there around their second pick in the second round. I also think, but let's break down Jalen Johnson. Before we do that, I got to take just a quick break, so I'm going to pause the recording here real quick. All right, thank you so much, guys. So due to some time issues, we're going to have to just fast forward here. Breaking down the rest of their draft, in the second round, they went with Jalen Johnson. I thought a good pick from Utah. In the fifth round, they went with Trevis Gibson, an edge rusher from Tulsa who had 8 sacks. In the fifth round, their other picks, they went with Kindle Vildor, a corner from Georgia Southern, and Darnell Mooney, a wide receiver from Tulane, who had 713 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2019. And then in the seventh round, they finally draft some offensive line help, going with Arlington Hambright, a guard from Colorado, and I'm gonna try this. I've been practicing. LaChavarius Simmons, a guard from Tennessee State. So they did draft some offensive line help there, but I think as a draft, it left quite a bit to the imagination. Now moving on to their season, we've already talked about the Bears twice. We've talked about them in terms of a Week 3 matchup against Atlanta and a Week 6 matchup against Carolina. I had them losing to Atlanta but beating Carolina. Mitch had them beating Carolina, and do you have them beating or losing to Atlanta?
They lose to Atlanta.
And a loss to Atlanta. So, and then Sky Guy here is just joining us, so we'll break them all down. Week 1 matchup at Detroit. I have the Bears winning that game. What do you guys have?
I have them losing to the Lions.
I have them winning. I still like, even though Detroit's gonna be, I think, had a good off season and is much more improved, and having Matthew Stafford back would be great. I still think that Chicago's defense, even with some questionable moves this offseason, is just too good.
Too good, yeah. I agree. Week 2, they play the Giants the third straight year. The Giants have played them competitive the last couple of seasons, but I think the Bears' defense is just too much. I give it to the Bears, a Week 2 win against the Giants.
Yeah, I have the Bears beating the Giants. I think all the listeners now know my opinions on the New York teams, so they're probably not surprised about my pick.
I actually have them losing this game against the Giants. I think that Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than most people gave him credit for. And I think that the Giants had an okay offseason, probably not the one that they needed. I still don't know why they picked the head coach they did. But I think that Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones is going to be a good tandem.
Yeah.
And I think they go into Soldier Field and win this game.
Interesting. Week 3 matchup against Atlanta. Both Mitch and I have them losing. Sky Guy, what do you have them at?
I have them winning.
You got them winning?
I have them winning against Atlanta. I like Matt Ryan as a quarterback, and I like the Falcons as an organization. But they need to prove something to me. Since they lost to the Patriots in the best Super Bowl that has ever been played, they've been on a slump. Until they prove otherwise, they're not even a 500 team to me.
Yeah,
so
and go back and listen to our Atlanta episode and let us know what you guys think about that. So Week 4, they play the Colts. I think the Colts – I'm pretty high on the Colts this year. I have the Colts winning that game. I think they have enough weapons. I think defensively they're sneakily good, and I think they're going to frustrate the Bears enough to get a win. So I think that the Colts beat the Bears.
I think that the Bears are going to beat the Colts. I don't trust Phillip Rivers. I don't think we're going to get the prime Phillip Rivers. I think we're going to get the guy who we saw last season.
Beat the Bears.
Yeah, but he's on a worse team now. So
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
He's on a worse team?
Yes.
Yeah,
Marlon Mack and Darius Leonard and
Colts-
T.Y. Hilton and
the
one of the
Colts
best
are
offensive lines in the NFL. And
Oh,
he's
the
on
Colts are
worst
so.
team?
Okay, if I'm choosing between the Colts defense and the Bears offense, I'm picking the Bears offense.
No, you guys are.
Yes.
This hurts. This hurts. One of the most underrated offensive line. They're solid across the board. They have a strong rushing attack. They're pretty okay at the wide receiver position. Need help at the tight end position. But I thought they had drafted that. They addressed that in the draft. Okay. Well, we'll get to the Colts when we get to the Colts. They're coming up.
I agree. I agree that the Colts had a good
Ooh.
offseason and that their offense is good. I also don't trust Phillip Rivers. He's old. We're not going to get prime Phillip Rivers. Again, I've also never liked Phillip Rivers. That's just me.
is it the bolo tie?
Maybe.
Other
Other people seem to like him. I don't. I've never really liked him as a quarterback. We're not going to get prime Phillip Rivers.
Okay.
They still have enough
Who do
questions.
you got
and the
winning,
Bears-
Sky Guy? The Colts or the
The
Bears?
Bears. The Bears. The Bears defense is too good. Their pass rush with
Ah.
Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack will tear Phillip Rivers a new one.
Not with that offensive line, they won't, but whatever. All right, Week 5 matchup. They play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers are just going to be too overwhelming, both offensively and defensively. I think the Bears lose that game.
Yeah, I think Tampa Bay is the perfect matchup against that Bears defense. I think they have enough weapons and they have the right guy at the quarterback position to counter whatever they can do defensively. And then I think, Tampa's defense can hold up against whatever the Bears decide to throw out on offense.
Tampa has some underrated players on defense, like Levante David. Only other player in the first 8 years of his career to have 1,000 tackles, 20 sacks, and 10 interceptions in his first 8 years. Bears lose.
Cool. So then Week 6 matchup against Carolina. We already covered this. Go listen to the Panthers episode. Both Mitch and I have them beating the Panthers. Sky Guy, who you got?
I agree.
All right, interesting.
Matt Rule's new coach. I think he's going to send them in the right direction, but not in the first 6 weeks.
Interesting. All right, so Week 7 matchup against the LA Rams at Los Angeles. I actually have them beating the Rams with the massive question marks the Rams have on offensive line. Probably the only team with maybe a worse offensive line than the Bears. I think that Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn are going to live in the backfield and make it a really tough day at the office for Jared Goff. I have the Bears winning that game.
Yeah, I have the Bears beating the Rams. I think it's going to come down to the offensive lines versus the pass rushers. I mean, who's going to hold up more, the Bears defensive line against Aaron Donald and just Aaron Donald, or the Rams offensive line against, Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn? And I think that's going to be the deciding factor for the Bears to win.
This was a difficult one for me to pick because we're getting towards the middle of the season. Some players are going to be out on injury. I have the Bears losing this game because they have so many question marks with health, especially on that defensive line with Akeem Hicks and Robert Quinn. If they're healthy, Bears win. It's not a question. But I don't trust that those key aging players on that defense, I think, makes it tough for me to confidently say they win this game.
Interesting. So Week 8 matchup, they play the Saints. This to me is on the same stroke as the Tampa Bay game. The Saints lined up so well. They creamed the Bears last season with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. I have them beating the Saints in Chicago once again. I'm sorry, I have the Saints beating the Bears in Chicago once again.
Yeah, I have the Saints beating the Bears for the same exact reasons that Tom Brady and the Bucs are going to beat the Bears.
Same. New Orleans is too good. And they just added more this offseason. So
interesting. So we all have the Bears going 4-4 by the halfway point of the season. We've only agreed across the board on 3 games, agreeing that they would all lose to lose to the Buccaneers. They'd all beat the Panthers, and they'd all lose to the Saints. So that is interesting. that we all ended up with the same record there. Week 9 matchup against Tennessee. This game was the most difficult for me to figure out. I changed my answer on this 4 different times. I have them beating the Titans, and I think it's that the Bears' run defense is going to be just good enough with the loss of Jack Conklin for the Titans' offensive line. It's going to be just good enough to hold that Tennessee offense in place, and I think the Bears' offense is going to do just enough to win that game. So I actually have the Bears beating the Titans.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you. I think the Titans are gonna beat the Bears. I think Derrick Henry's gonna run all over them. I don't think that the Bears have the corners to match up with AJ Brown, and I think that
They would just need Kyle Fuller. They can just put Kyle Fuller on him. Done. They have the corner.
Nah. And then I think the Titans defense, even though they did lose Jarrell Casey, who was a big part of it, I think they're solid enough to hold the Bears offense.
For a 7th-round pick. I'm so excited to get to Denver because that was a steal for a 7th-round pick. Oof. Sky Guy, who you got winning?
This was also a tough one. It's one of the mini games. I have them going. It could go either way. I have Tennessee winning this game because as much as, again, I don't really like Ryan Tannehill, I think that he's a good game manager, and he can sell the play action. And the Bears lost too much in their secondary and then didn't replace it, in my opinion, well enough. And then again, injuries. If Bears defense is healthy, they can contend with anyone. But I have Tennessee winning this game.
It's going to be a black and blue football game. It's going to be a fun one to watch. Week 10 against Minnesota, I picked the Bears to win this, and the reason is that Matt Nagy, as I stated, is 9-3 against the NFC North. He's never lost a game to the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think that continues with this game. It's in Chicago. Kirk Cousins has not played historically well against the Bears defense. I have the Bears beating the Vikings.
I have the Vikings beating the Bears. I think that Kirk Cousins, last year he showed the haters that he could win a primetime game in the playoffs. And I think that this year his challenge is going to be, showing that he can, beat the Bears defense. As you said, he hasn't played a while against. So I think that, with Kirk Cousins, he still has Adam Thielen, they drafted Justin Jefferson. So if he lives up to the hype, he can slide into that number 2 position. And then they have Dalvin Cook, one of the better backs in the league. And I think, he's going to, get his touches. And then the Vikings defense, minus the secondary, is still pretty solid. So
sure.
See, I agree with Brady on this one, actually. I think that Chicago wins this game. Because Kirk Cousins doesn't have the ref help he had in the playoff game against the Saints. So, and also I don't trust Kirk Cousins yet. I still don't trust him. And I think part of the reason he was so successful the last couple of years is because he had Kevin Stefanski as his offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have him anymore.
Still got Gary Kubiak though.
He does, yeah. but I think Kevin Stefanski just did a good job with Kirk Cousins and got him into worked him well enough, but I don't trust Kirk Cousins.
Sure.
Losing Stephon Diggs also, I think, is, as much as I like Justin Jefferson, it's hard to replace.
Yeah, that's fair. And we'll get to the Vikings here, but the Vikings are one of the teams, I'm going to say this with a lot of teams, that really seem to be like an enigma, where you can run through their schedule one time and they may go 6-10, and then you can run through it another time and they may go 13-3. And it's really difficult to try to figure out.
Like this schedule.
Yeah, exactly, right? So literally the first time I did this, when I was just like, the Bears are going to stay healthy the whole season, nothing's going to go wrong, I had them going 13-3. And then I went through and revisited that 3 times. So then week 11 bye, they come out of the bye, they go to Green Bay. I think this is a loss for the Bears. I think at this point, they don't play historically well in Lambeau. They're 3-17 against the Packers since 2010. They're just consistently not good against Green Bay. I don't see them squeaking this one out. I have them losing to the Packers.
Yep, and just as the prophecy has been told many years, the Packers will beat the Bears.
Packers are the kings of the North until somebody dethrones them. So Packers win it.
Interesting. Okay, finally agree on another one. Week 13 matchup against Detroit. This was difficult because I actually had them originally splitting a series with Detroit, but the more I thought about it, we're talking about week 13. I think Detroit's going to be really hurt, going to go into Chicago to play a game. I have the Bears beating the Lions there.
Yeah, I have the Bears beating the Lions. I don't think the Lions are going to sweep the Bears. I think it's going to be a split series.
Yep. I have the Bears going in and winning too. I think that Detroit, I think the second position for the NFC North is in the air, honestly, and any Minnesota Bears or Detroit can fill it. I think that the schedule and just the team, the Bears are the better.
Sure. So interesting. So week 14 matchup, we hope we may see Deshaun Watson versus Mitch Trubisky. Who knows at this point in the season? So many question marks on the Houston offensive line. Weapons really depleted right now. I love the Texans, but I got to give this one to the Bears. I think offensively and defensively, the Bears maybe have an edge over Houston, even with Deshaun Watson at quarterback.
Yeah, I think the Bears are going to win pretty easily against Houston. I think Houston's a worse team than the Chicago Bears as at this moment. I mean, really the only thing keeping that team together is Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt.
If J.J. Watt is healthy, I think that the Houston can win this game, but it's a tough game for me because Deshaun Watson is just such a good quarterback. And
yeah,
I didn't think they had any business winning against the Bills in the playoff game either, but they did. But I had to give it to the Bears. The Bears, even if the Bears are hurt, their defense is still better than the offensive line of the Texans.
I do feel like that game is going to be like a 14-13 football game.
Oh,
I think it's going to be a low-scoring, very close football game.
First quarterback to throw an interception, that team loses.
Probably, most likely. So week 15 matchup at Minnesota, I have the Vikings winning that game. I think in Minnesota they play a lot better. Last season when the game was in Minnesota, the Vikings rested all their starters and still gave the Bears a run for their money. I think at this point Minnesota is going to be vying for solid playoff position, if not maybe fighting Green Bay in order to try to get that NFC North crown. So I have Minnesota winning that game.
Yeah, I have Minnesota sweeping the Bears. It's in Minnesota. That's a tough place to play. Just ask us Packers fans. And like you said, with it being this late in the season, especially in the NFC North, it's always a dogfight over the past decade. So I think the Vikings are going to pull it out.
See, I'm banking on there not being fans in the stands, and if there's no fans in the stands, the Bears win the game.
That's interesting.
So like as much as I like the Vikings, as much as like I respect the Vikings, again, I don't trust Kirk Cousins. And if there's no fans in the stands for Skull, then the Bears defense is again just they're gonna win.
Still got the horn.
I have the I have the Bears sweeping the Vikings. So I think the Bears got it.
That is interesting. They've done it the last two seasons. Week 16 matchup. I hope we can all agree on this at Jacksonville. I don't think really anything has to be said. It's at Jacksonville. I have the Bears winning this game.
You know what? I actually have Minshew Mania beating the Bears. No, I'm just kidding. The Bears are going to beat Jacksonville. I think with this Jacksonville loss, I think if it hasn't happened before, but this loss will confirm that the Jacksonville will have the number 1 overall pick and they'll draft Trevor Lawrence. So go Bears.
Yeah. Unless Minshew throws for 400 yards and Fournette runs for 200, no, there's no way Jacksonville wins this game. So go Bears.
Dude, Fournette might even be on the team.
You're right.
Week 17, they closed the season. Home game against Green Bay. This was a toss-up to me because I feel like this could be a game where Green Bay would rest some of its starters. So I thought this could be one that maybe Chicago would pull out. I think both teams are going to be fighting for playoff position in this point. Not necessarily fighting for maybe the NFC North, but for playoff position, especially with the extra playoff seed now. So I say that they lose that game because I think Green Bay is going to come in fully healthy, knock on wood, and I think Green Bay is going to be playing for a little bit more than maybe just trying to get into the playoffs. So I actually have Green Bay sweeping the Bears again.
Yeah, I have the Packers are going to sweep the Bears. either, we're going to have all the starters and we're going to try to win this game to get better playoff positioning, or we're going to be in a comfortable place. And I think we'll get to see like Jordan Love start his first game, and I think he's going to pull off a win over the
That'd be a
Bears.
tough game to start.
I think he'll pull off a win over the Bears, and that's when the cries for just Jordan Love are going to, slowly creep in.
You see, if we were still using the same playoff seeding as we were last year, I think that the Packers would have been playing for more.
Yeah.
But if they're in the third seed at this, they rest their starters because you don't get the bye. It's irrelevant either way. So.
Okay, so you have the Bears winning that game, or
no? I have the Packers winning that. Okay. I have the Packers winning that game. I think that even though I think the Bears at that end of the season will probably have some kind of identity offensively, I don't think it's good enough to beat the Packers.
Interesting. So, looking like to finish it all out, there's kind of a running theme here through our takes. With me, I don't have the Bears very streaky. I have them starting out with 2 wins, then losing 3, then winning 2, then kind of going back and forth on there. I have them finishing 9-7. That is good enough for me to get them into that 7th seed at the playoffs. I do think there will be playoff football again with the Bears. But if they're the 7th seed, that means they're having to play the 2 seed, which means it could be a situation where they play Green Bay week 17 and then have to turn around and play a team like Green Bay in the first week of the playoffs too, which could be interesting. Mitch, it looks like you have the Bears going 7-9. Is that correct?
6-10.
You have them. 6-10. Okay, then I missed one. But 6-10. Is that good enough for the Bears to fire everybody?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, that's a losing record. And, with some of the teams that they lost to, I think, Pace is gone. I mean, with 10 losses, obviously Trubisky wasn't good enough to be your quarterback, so he's gone. And then I think Nagy stays for a year or 2 more just to see what he can do with a different quarterback and a different GM.
So, Mitch, then I missed one on you. So who do you have the Bears beating in 2019?
They beat the Giants, they beat the Colts, they beat the Panthers, they beat the Rams. Let's see. Oh, no, you're right. I just suck at math.
7-9. Okay. Well, still 7-9. I still agree with your points. And then Sky Guy, it looks like you have them going 9-7. You actually, interestingly, have them win 4 straight games to almost close the season out before that game against Green Bay. Which I think would be strong enough for a playoff push, but is 9-7 on you good enough for them to make the playoffs?
I think it is. I mean, I have almost half of their season. I think it's toss-ups, honestly, depending on health, depending on who's at quarterback. I'm going in expecting them to be healthier than they were last year, and no fans in the stands. I think gives them some advantages in the NFC North that they wouldn't normally at in away games. And I'm expecting Nick Foles again. I'm expecting Nick Foles to start, and I think that he gives them an ability to at least be kind of competitive. I think at 9-7 they'll at least be battling for the 7th or 6th seed, one of those wild card spots.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Bears are good enough to make the playoffs with the extra playoff seed. I don't have them making it if we don't have the extra seed there.
It's a lot tougher.
It is. So that is interesting. Once again, so me and Sky Guy pretty much agree we're at 9-7 making the playoffs. Mitch, you have them at 7-9. Looking more, I think, at that point towards a rebuild based off what you have them at, which for them would be nice because they would finally have a first-round pick again, which they'll probably trade away, knowing Chicago. So, yeah, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. We're sorry for the shorter episode today. We just had some stuff that came up. On the next episode, we're going to break down the Cincinnati Bengals. I think truly one of the interesting teams in the NFL. We're going to break down their draft. We're going to break down the abysmal 2019 season they had and where we think they're going to go. So everybody tune in. And then after that, we have the Cleveland Browns. And I think we have some varying opinions on the Browns here. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Sky Guy, thank you so much for joining us. You're invited
Thanks for having me
anytime. Mitch, you have any closing thoughts before I just give the email and wrap the show up?
No, I don't have anything today.
Interesting. Sky Guy, any closing thoughts before I wrap the show up?
Just stay safe out there, guys. I know in a lot of cities around the country, a lot of things are happening. Just be safe. Whatever whatever you think of what's happening, don't make stupid decisions. Just stay safe and think of others,
Yeah.
please.
Agreed.
Well
Everybody,
said.
please stay safe. If you have any questions, comments, if you're a Bears fan and you love the picks, if you're a Bears fan and you hate the picks, or if you're a Cincinnati or a Cleveland fan and you're excited for the next couple episodes, email us. You can email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's spelled out FOURTH stringsp@gmail.com. Tune in. We're going to drop this episode. We're going to record the next episode here next Wednesday. And then hopefully with that Cleveland episode, we'll have some more insight with how the NBA is going to look when they come back. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and everybody have yourself a fantastic night.